Alright everyone, let's start discussing Revit 2025. I'm going to try to give you all the important points regarding the newest details of this software. Well, let's see. Let's start talking about our first item here, which is new Revit Home. Well, to be honest, this isn't that new though. I mean, we had this in 24th version of the software as well. However, in the 25th version of the software, it is simply more enhanced. I mean, for example, now you are able to easily change up your work environment by only a click on the switch here. And then in here, we have some sorting settings as well. For example, we have the list or the grid, or we can sort everything by their names or type or even date, or basically any other option that we want. And then on the right side, we have the search, and we can use this to search and find whatever we need. And after we're done, we can just easily close it down. Oh, and another option that has been added here is pin. We can use it to pin the most useful files. I mean, to distinguish them from other files or to make them more accessible. Then in here, we have the filter. Let's say we only want to display the files that we have opened today, last week, last month, last 3 months, or let's say we want to display them based on their families, based on their models. We can separate them, we can clear them. And by the way, if you are using, for example, Autodesk Construction Cloud, you can actually have a more organized template. If you open up Files, then Option, then from Cloud Model, you could activate this option here. And as a result, you would have a list of all the Revit files that you have worked with so far. This option is specified for cloud-based. And now, as you can see, our workspace, our template, or you can say even our files are more organized than before, and we can use them more easily. Alright, so this was new Revit Home, which has gotten more enhanced in the 2025 version of the software. Here we have Autodesk Project or the cloud base, then we have my insert as well. But as you can see, this is empty right now because I only have local here. Alright, the next item that we need to discuss here is interface enhancements. Now, this item mostly points out the graphical changes, or it's actually better to say graphical enhancements that we can see in Revit 2025. For example, we have 3D snapping, workplane space settings, ellipse lines or arc lines, or apply area rule option, modify scale tools, or let's see, annotation and levels. And by the way, we're going to go through all of them one by one. For example, first we have 3D snapping here. Alright, let's see what this item exactly does for us. I'm going to enter Revit and open up a file such as this one. Oh, before we start, let me remind you, nothing new has been added here. I mean, we had the exact same options and items before. The only change is a matter of replacements. In other words, where the items were before and where they are right now. I mean, they are in either Properties Palette or Ribbon. Alright, anyway, the first item that we wanted to discuss is 3D snapping. Basically, when we are working in Revit, for some of the tools, we have some 3D snaps. To give you an example, if I go ahead and create something like a column in my viewport, something like this, and then if I select BIM, for example, we would see that instead of having 3D snappings in our option bar, we have them in Ribbon. And we can activate the snaps that we want from here and start using them in our projects, as you can see. And the same goes for other tools as well. You can find 3D snapping in Ribbon from now on. Okay, I'm going to go to Master and Site to work on another example. I'm going to try to create an object such as this one. Now, if I, for example, select line here, we can see that 3D snap option is set in Ribbon. And as always, we can activate it and start using it as we want in our project. See, we can manage our file in any way that we want to. Alright, moving on to our next item, which is workplane space settings. We can find it in Properties window. In other words, up here from workplane, if we activate Show, you would see a grid as your workplane. And if we select this, we would be able to manage and control this grid even further from Properties window. See, this is quite simpler, you can say. Compared to what we had in older versions. And yeah, that's it. Off again and back here. And let's move on to our next item. Let's say we are working with an ellipse, such as this one here. Or better yet, let's say we have an arc. Yeah, let's add an arc here as well. Now, if we check Properties window, we can see this option, this parameter, Keep Ratio, which by default is activated. Now, this means if we try to change up the size of our ellipse, for example, the changes would apply based on some sort of a consistency. However, if we deactivate it, we won't be able to see that specific consistency anymore. So let me reactivate this again, and here we go. Somehow the same goes for the arc as well. The only difference is here we have keep concentric, which is related to the center point of our arc. In other words, retaining the center point of our arc. If we deactivate this, as you can see, the center point would change as well. However, as I mentioned before, by default, these two options are activated. Alright, let's talk about the next item that we have in Revit 2025. The item is called Apply Area Row Option. Again, another item which we can find in Ribbon instead of Option Bar. Okay, let me try to elaborate. Let's say we have some sort of a wall, for example, in our viewport. Something like this, maybe. Then I'm going to go ahead and add some lines here as well. And then maybe a furniture too. Okay. Now, if I click on Area Plan, we could see that the software would automatically create some sort of a boundary, or we can say distinguish as some sort of a boundary as our area plan. Okay, yeah, that's good and all, but what exactly is the point here? Well, let me remove this for a second. The point is, when we want to use area boundary, or when we want to distinguish the spaces that we have, we would see an additional option called Apply Area Row. And this option was set in Option Bar before. Alright, let's see what it does. If we leave this activated and try to create or draw the boundaries of our area, we would need some specific elements related to the boundary itself. For example, walls. See, lines or other elements cannot be selected here. Only elements related to walls can be selected here. However, if we deactivate this option, we would be able to work with any elements that we want, because we are not working on a specific boundary anymore. And again, now we can find this option in Rebound instead of Option Bar, so it is more accessible. Alright, moving on to our next item, which is Scale. Now, obviously, we had scale tools in all of the versions of this software which we have worked with so far. However, something that is different in Revit 2024 regarding scale tools is that we don't see graphical or numerical options in our option bar anymore. Instead, we can find them in Rebound. See, for example, if I select graphical here, I would be able to change up the scale graphically like this, or let me activate scale again, this time numerical, then specify a number, and then just click somewhere on your object to change up its scale. And yeah, that's it. This is scale and its changes in Revit 2025. Next up, we have the levels. Alright. In older versions, when we wanted to create our levels, we would have seen some options here, for example, create plan view. And if we would have clicked on it, a window would have opened for us. then we could have specified our architecture, for example, structure or ceiling. However, now we can find this option in Rebone instead of option bar. See, up here we have create plan view, and by default it's deactivated, as you can see, unlike the older versions, what we had in older versions. And actually, it's more logical for this option to be activated by default, and this might just be the case in the next upgrade of the software. Now, when we deactivate this, it means that we are drawing with a reference mode, and when we activate it, it means that we have floor plan. And then we can actually click on plan view type and specify a type for it as well. So this was the enhancements that we have in Revit 2025 regarding levels. And let's see, the last item that we're going to discuss today is tags. Yeah. If we go ahead and select tag and category here, we won't see any specific option or any option at all in our option bar, and instead we can find the required options in Rebone. Well, actually in both Rebone and properties. Because as you can see, we have some options in properties window, for example, whether if we want to use leader or what kind of leader, for example, attach, free, and so on. However, other options such as the distance or the type of families or the tag that we want to replace can be specified from here. So again, what I'm trying to say here is that for tags, we got no options in option bar anymore. Instead, we have them in Rebone and in properties window. And by the way, this goes for all the subcategories that we have for tags as well. For example, materials tag or, keynotes. All of these would fall under the tag category. And yeah, we're done. These were all the changes that have been applied to these tools in Revit 2025. Welcome back, everyone. Let's discuss another interesting factor in Revit 2025. One of the most common problems that Revit users would face is that before Revit 2025, when we wanted to create sheets or when we wanted to extract those sheets as a PDF file, we weren't able to work with our software during the, for example, extraction process. We had to wait for it to be done. In other words, we just had to sit there, wait, and do absolutely nothing until the extraction process was completely done. However, this isn't the case in Revit 2025 anymore. We have this option down here, export in background. If we activate this, the exporting process would be done in the background, and now we would be able to work with our software and do other stuff while the process is being done. Alright, let me give you a demonstration. I'm going to use this sample file that we have here. As you can see, we have several sheets here. Now, if I go ahead and up here click on PDF, a window would open. For now, I'm going to go with this range, which contains all of these sheets. Alright. Now, if I go ahead and try to export these sheets, let me specify a path for it as well. If I try to export them while the export in the background option is deactivated, we won't be able to use our software to do any other thing while the process is on. And we can actually check the process down here as well. Okay? I'm going to cancel this process for now. Yes. And now let's see how it's done in Revit 2025. As I said before, I'm going to activate export in background. Then try to export the files again, yes. The software would be unavailable only for a few seconds while the process is being started. And after those few seconds, we would have full access to our software again, and we won't face any limitations while the process is on. Then we can check the process down here in background process as well. Just wait for it. Alright, now the process is started. And as you can see, I'm able to use Revit as well. And down here, I said we can check the process. For example, as you can see, 4 sheets have been exported out of 55. Then we can, for example, leave this window open, then keep working on our project and check the process, the exporting process simultaneously. This is actually a very important and essential characteristic that has been added to Revit in the new version. Because before, we just had to wait for a process and do exactly nothing for like 10 minutes or even 20 minutes or even half an hour. So if you really think about it, we are saving a lot of time here. Now, let's say we want to cancel the exporting process. We can just click here. See? And now we can close this down. Alright everyone, so this was background export that we can use for creating PDF files out of the sheets that we have in Revit without killing any time. Another interesting characteristic of Revit 2025 is import, export, or STEP or STEP format. Using this format, we would be able to work with wider range or wider types of CAD files that have the same format, STEP or STEP format in Revit. For example, let's say we have this file here, and by the way, in Revit we can use the environmental tools, the environment plugin, to convert such files into files with RFA format or any other format that we want. However, here let's say we want to use STEP format. So I'm gonna export this CAD format in a path with STEP format. Here. Let me give it a name and save. Now, back to Revit. Then from Insert tab, Import CAD. I'm going to go ahead and select the step file, step format file. I'm going to set this in mechanical equipments here. And in the first level, then set this on manual origin. Okay. Now we can set this in our viewport with a click. See, this is very useful. Or we can do something else. We can link it in our viewport. So from link, I'm going to select the file again, set the unit and meters, manual. Okay, let me see. The scale is too large, as you can see, because we set the unit and meters. So I'm going to change it to auto instead. So it would automatically uses the best unit for us, and it's usually millimeters, and now we can set it somewhere around here, for example. But question here, what is the difference between import and link? Well, let's see. This one was the link version, right? I'm going to go ahead and try to edit this sketch here. Okay, I'm going to change the dimension here to 25. And yeah, this would be the result. Now, again, I'm going to export this on the same path. Yes. Now again, in Revit, we have both import version and link version. Reset. And I'm going to use a section box here. Now this one, the link version could be updated. We can use manage link, then select the CAD format here, and then click on reload to apply the new modifications. So this is a very useful technique that we are able to use in the new version. Oh, and another point, you can actually use this website, Grab CAD, to download a wide range of such files. Then we can specify a software here as well, for example, SolidWorks or CATIA. I'm going to go with CATIA here. And then use some of these files with STP format in Revit. And by the way, actually some of these files, or even most of them, have the step format by default. Let me see. I'm going to go to library here. And then again here, I'm going to select CATIA. And yeah, here we go. These are all some CATIA files. This one actually has been exported out of Inventor software, yet still it has the step format as well. So we can just select this file, log into our account, and then download this file completely easily as well as free. Alright, so this was how we can work with STP or step format in Revit 2025. Alright, moving on with our work regarding Revit 2025, we have sheet collection. Using this interesting item, we would be able to categorize, manage, and control the sheets that we have based on their types, their views, their discipline, and basically any other aspects that we find necessary. Alright, let's see how exactly this item works in Revit 2025. I'm going to go to Sheets and do a right click here. Now, I'm going to select New Sheets Collection. Now, immediately afterwards, a new collection would be created here for us, and we can change its name as well from Properties window here. See, with only a right click, rename. For example, I'm going to go with Floor Plans. Okay, again, another right click, New Sheet Collection, and this time I'm going to go with Elevation Views for the name. Alright, another one, and this time for the name, Section Views. And we can basically go on and on like this. Now, we have two ways for setting the sheets in our collections. As our first way, first we need to select the files that we need. For example, let me see. I'm going to select these files. Here we go. Now, I can easily use either a click drag to set them in the collection, or we can do something else. Let me select the files again. And then, if we check Properties window, we can see for each sheet, we have a parameter called Sheet Collection. So again, let's say we have this, these files, these sheets selected, and now I'm able to easily specify a collection for all of these sheets from the sheet collection list here. Now let's see how we can remove a sheet out of a collection. It is quite easy. I'm going to go ahead and select the sheet that we want to remove. And then from Properties window, again, Sheet Collection, open up the list and select None. And then we can always set it back as well. And basically we can keep on doing this for the rest of the sheets as well. And set all the sheets in their own particular collections. Oh, and by the way, if you have specified a collection, for example, if I go to L1 here, from Properties window, we can see that specific collection that we are using. For example, here is Floor Plans. And as you can see, Sheet Collection parameter is deactivated here, and it would just display something based on what we have used before. It could be either none or the collections that we have selected before. And then we can actually set other items in our collections as well. Another interesting point is that from View, then Create Panel, then Schedule, then from View List, we can actually have access to our sheet collection. And here, for example, I can select Sheet Name, View Name, Sheet Number, and Collection. I'm going to move this up, and yeah, that's it. Oh, and by the way, if you have specified a collection to a view such as this, you won't be able to add any kind of modifications, new modifications. However, if I go ahead and select sheet list here, and then select, for example, sheet name, number, and sheet collection, now I would be able to apply new modifications as well, which makes our work quite easier. And now I'm able to go to, for example, sorting and grouping and do some organizing as I want to. Or I can actually go to field here and then sort out some, you can say, factors that I want to work based on. And then once again, get on with the organizing and categorizing. And again, this is quite easy and simple. Let's see what we have down here. It's floor plans. I need to select floor plans here as well. Okay. And we can basically continue doing this as we want. For example, for site plan, again, set this on floor plans. And let's see where else. Here too. So you can manage your collection however you want. Okay, another interesting point that is worth mentioning here is that you're not able to create a new collection inside another one. You're not simply allowed to do so. What you can do here is that you can actually do a right click on a collection that you already have, new collection, then select the sheet that you want and add it into that collection. Let me create another collection here, a new collection. Then again, another right click, new sheet, and okay. And by the way, we are actually able to use repeated names here as well. For example, as you can see, we have a couple of A101s, see? But this is not possible in general mode. So if I click drag these two into this collection, it would give me a warning which says we have repeated names. So again, you can't create a new sheet collection inside another one. You can have different views with the same names in different collections, which is quite interesting. This wasn't possible in the older versions. And let's see what else. Another point is that when we specify our schedule, for example, when we specify it on sheet list, for example, let's see, number list and collection. Okay. Now from filters, we would be able to filter some of these factors as well. For example, let's say I only want to display the details sheet collection. Okay, I'm going to set this on none. Now from sort, we can sort them based on collections. See, this is quite interesting. We have organized everything based on the collections. And we can use some lines like these to separate the collections and sheets. So these are some interesting and helpful points which we can use in our projects. All right, another point is that when we are tagging the sheet collections or reference sheet collections for like view title, reference, callout head, elevation mark, section mark, or title block, we can use either sheet collection or reference sheet collection. For example, I'm going to open up files, view, annotation symbol. Now I'm going to select callout. Now from label, I can go ahead and add the sheet collection. And again, this is a very useful point. Or as another example, let me close this down. Again, I'm going to select symbol. And this time I'm going to select view title. Now again, if I open this window, we can see that we have both sheet collection and reference sheet collection, which we can select. And the same goes for the rest of the views that I have mentioned a few seconds ago. All right, I'm going to close this down again and go back to our project. If we go ahead and do a double click on each of these sheet collections, they would immediately be opened And we can just easily do another double click to close them down. This would help us to check the sheet collections quite fast and rapidly. Another point is that when we want to create PDF export out of these sheets, here we have this option, select view sheet. If you click on it, we would have a list of all the sheet collections. Now we can export the files based on the collections, for example, elevation, or only details, or floors, or even sections. And let's see what else. If you go ahead and select View Reference from the View tab, we can see that in View Reference, we have sheet collections as well. And if you have set the views in different sheets before, you can actually control them from here. For example, I'm going to go ahead and open up this file, then get a duplicate here, and another one. And then I'm going to enter here and try to somehow limit this object like this. All right, off. Now I'm going to add a line, match line. Okay, finish. All right, now the next one. Again, go ahead and add the limitation. Like this. Now, okay, let's see. In this side that we have the sheets. Let's see. I'm going to do right click and create a couple of collections. Then I'm going to create a new sheet in the first collection. All right. Now in the second collection, again, new sheet, and set it here. Now back here, view reference. I'm going to click here. All right. Now if I select this, it would give me the exact collection as well. We can select the second one up here. As you can see, we have both collection number 1 and 2. Now we can actually enter edit type as well. And if reference plane is deactivated, we can go ahead and activate it. All right. Now label, click here and add sheet collection as well. And this is how we can specify the collections in our sheets as well. This is helpful for when we want to work with many different views, collections, and sheets. For example, we can make everything more distinguishable. Alright everyone, this was sheet collections and how they exactly work in Revit 2025. Another ability that we have in the newest version of Revit software is the ability of aligning several tags, texts, and keynotes. Now this ability falls under the documentation category and it's quite useful. Alright, let me give you an example for further elaboration. I'm going to enter the details here. For example, let's see, detail view here. Or I'm going to try to find something with some tags and text. This one, yeah, this is good. See, we have some tags and text in this file. Now, when you want to create some tags in a file, your end result might be a little bit disorganized. I'm going to select these, then from filter, select text, and then up here, some tools would appear for us. More precisely, we have a tools here. Now, this option here is align elements up. It is set on vertical right now. If we use it, the aligning would go through like this. Control Z. Now again, I'm going to select these. Next, we have align elements middle. Again, it is set on vertical and the aligning would be like this. Next, we have distribute vertically. This option would distribute the tags vertically and with a specific and equal distance between them. Then we have these tools which can help us to align the elements horizontally. Distribute them horizontally, for example, to the left, to the middle, or right. And the result would be, again, something like this. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and select these. And overall, we are able to use these techniques and tools in different parts of our project. For example, I'm going to select this. Check none. Text. Okay. Now, based on what we want and our own ideas, we can go ahead and align these texts to the left maybe, or right, or any other way that we want. So again, this is a very interesting and useful tool. Again, select text notes. And as you can see, with each click, new modifications would be applied on our tags and texts. Alright, Control Z, let's go back. As you can see, we have some sort of a breakdown here. That's why it doesn't go exactly the way I want to. And in fact, our view is something like this. One part here and another one here. So again, the tags were kind of disorganized because of the gap in between the views. So this is another factor which you need to take into consideration when you are working on your own projects. Separate the views first and work on each part separately. I forgot to select a couple of tags. And yeah, everything is well organized, as you can see. And the same goes for the top parts. Tags and keynotes. And here we go. And yeah, that's it. This was multiple alignments, another useful item which we can use in Revit 2025. Alright everyone, in this session we're going to talk about IFC export category mapping. This item would help us create some customized templates for more accurate IFC mappings. Alright, without any further ado, let's go ahead and see how exactly this item works. I'm going to open up a sample project, a sample file, for example, such as this one. And then from File, Export, IFC. I'm going to select this. Now, in here, if I click on Modify, I can see Category Mapping option. When I click on it, this window would immediately be open, and it contains some specific settings. For example, using this item, we can create a new template with any name that we want. Then for our next item, we have the import item. In other words, we can use it to import an IFC file that we have created before, or an old category mapping. Then using the next item, we can create a duplicate out of the current template that we have. And as always, you can specify a name for it as well. Alright, let's see what else. Next, we have the save item. We can save the settings that we apply. Then we have export. Then again, after exporting, you can actually import the file that you want. And yeah, next we have rename. For example, I'm going to rename this to structural model. And the last subcategory item that we have here is for deleting the templates that we don't need anymore. You can just select the templates and then click on delete. Alright, these were the subcategory items that we had in this window. Actually, I'm going to delete this one as well. Alright, let's see. We have a search here as well. For example, if I search wall here, it'll show me all the IFCs related to wall or, like door maybe. And all of these are the templates related to doors. Alright, if you take a look at here, you can see that we have some columns. In the first column, we have the checkboxes. We can use them to activate or deactivate the items that we want. Then in here, we can see the different categories that we have. Then in the next column, we can see different classes. Then we have predefined type and user-defined type here. Let's see what they are. First, predefined type. I'm going to click on it. As you can see, this window would open. But first, let me actually search wall here for a second. Then in here, IFC wall. If we select this, we can see that wall is activated here. But in predefined, we haven't activated anything. So I can go to predefined now and activate wall here. And then, for example, select this one maybe. And yeah, that's it. Now for the user-defined type, it is related to what you as a user have defined as a template. And it would appear here. And you can actually reset all the settings as well. Now again, in the same template, select wall. Remember, if I click on reset all the settings that we have gone through so far would be reset. So basically, based on the settings that you go through in this part, you can create some specific mappings and templates, which later on you can use for creating or actually for exporting the IFC files. Alright, let's talk about some interesting news for Dynamo software users in Revit. First of all, this is the newest update of Dynamo. And as I mentioned earlier, some interesting characteristics has been added to this software. For example, I'm going to enter Revit and from Management, select Dynamo. And then open up a template, an empty template. Now, first thing that we are going to talk about today is that in Revit 2025, with the help of Dynamo, this new version of Dynamo, you can work on the linked files a lot better than before. As you can see, some items have been added. For example, link element.bounding box, by array bound, get geometry, get location, link inverse transform, link transform, get link instance, and so many other nodes and items that have been added here. Okay, let me go ahead and give you an example. For example, from Revit. Now select elements. And if I could find it, we would see that, where is it? Here, link elements has been added, as well as link instance, actually. And as I said before, now we are able to work on the linked files a lot better than before. In previous versions, we didn't have full access to the IDs or linked elements. So as a result, we had to work with some programming tools to solve our problems. However, now with the newest version of Revit and Dynamo, we have the full access that we needed before to all of the linked files that we are working with. Another interesting part that has been added to the software is detailed level. Okay, let me find detail level. Let's say you have some geometries that you want to display in the background in your Revit software. And now you're able to specify some detail level for them as well. For example, medium, or even coarse or fine. So detail level is another item that has been added to our software. It could be used in geometry display. Okay, moving on. If you remember, in Mass Insight for creating topographies, Topo Solid was added. Now, in this version of Dynamo, we actually have some nodes for Topo Solids as well, which we can use to create Topo Solids. Control L and align all of these. So you can see the Topo Solid is based on outline or based on vertices and level, based on name, and basically other types that we have access to here. As you can see, we have other details such as export vertices and other details that might be necessary and useful for us. Next item that we can discuss regarding Dynamo is Package Manager. It has gotten more enhanced. Now it's more user-friendly. For example, we have a more enhanced search here, or for example, we can turn the details for each package on or off. We could see a list containing all the packages that we have, a list of updated packages, or even updated nodes, and basically so many other details which are completely and fully displayed here for us. We have all packages and loaded packages here as well. Here we have the published package, and then package settings, and so many other details, useful details that we have here. I'm going to close this down. If you remember, I said that we have a more enhanced search. Let's see what I meant by this. For example, we can search for something based on its category, like math.eq or LES. See, it's quite easy to work with. You just need to type down the category and put a dot afterwards. For example, string.co. And as you can see, it'll show me everything that starts with CO and fall under string category. Alright, so this was the matter of search in Dynamo and how it gotten more enhanced. Next up, we are going to talk about reading text in Dynamo. For example, here I'm going to type down category wall, then all elements of category, and then transfer everything into watch. And now, as you can see, reading these texts and details are quite more simpler. For example, we can do the scrolling more easily. This is actually especially useful when it comes to reading the long texts. For example, text with a lot of subcategories. To be honest, I actually like this item a lot, and I use it constantly in my own projects. This new version of Watch, or you can say Watch Node, is in fact helping us check the details that we have in our projects quite more easily. The next point is related to the sample files that we have in Dynamo. We can find them in Sample from Help. Here we have some updated Revit scripts. Well, actually, these are the last updates, and they are prepared for us in Dynamo, and we can use them. They can be used as sample files in Dynamo. For example, I'm going to select this. Okay, it'll open this automatically, so I'm going to cancel this and set this on manual. See, this is our default script here. And as I said, it is updated based on the last changes and modifications. Alright, so these were the updates that we have in the newest version of Dynamo in Revit 2025. In this session, we're going to discuss Material Browser in Revit 2025. In this version of the software, some interesting characteristics have been added regarding materials. For example, we have Quick, which gives us a preview of the render that we want to create. And it does not engage the CPU of our system. And you would have a preview of the end result in an instant. And another thing is you can actually select a collection of materials and then either delete them or add them to your library. Alright, let's start going through each item. I'm going to open up this Revit sample file, then minimize this one, and then put it somewhere like here, and open up Task Manager as well. Now from CPU, let me enlarge this a little bit more. In Revit, from Manage, I'm going to open up the Materials window. In previous versions, when we used to open up the Materials window and then select one of these materials, for example, I'm going to select one of, let's see, for example, this one. Then we would need to go to Appearance. Again, according to what we had in previous versions, we would have seen a sample of our material, and whatever modifications that we would apply on this material would appear on the preview of the sample that we have here. See? Then we have draft quality and production quality. Let's see what they are. If I select drafting, it would take us some time to get a preview of the modifications that we apply on our material. Plus, the CPU of our system would drastically and highly be engaged. Alright, let me apply some modifications here to show you what exactly is going to happen. See? Or, you know what, let's actually select a material with a texture. And then in here, I'm going to change up the dimensions of the texture. Remember, I'm not saying it doesn't work. It actually works. I'm just saying it takes a lot of time to do so. In other words, we can say it's not user-friendly. However, in Revit 2025, we have this item here called Quick. And as I said before, when we use Quick, not only we get an instant preview on everything, but also there's no engaging the CPU. So you can go through with your modifications, and at the end, if you wanted to check everything in more quality, you can change this to drafting. This way, you don't need to wait for the process to be done and go through like step by step. And you can say, instead of wasting time, you're saving it. And again, because you don't engage the CPU of the software, you would add a lot of pace to your work and you can work quite more easily. So as you can guess, this is one of the most important, you can say, abilities that has been added to the newest version of Revit software. Oh, and by the way, in previous versions of the software, the speed that we would have had was highly dependent on whether if we were using like a strong or a weak system or even a CPU. Alright, next thing that we can talk about regarding materials in Revit 2025 is how we can select several materials at the same time. I'm going to select a material, hold the Control key, and select the others. Or I can select the one in the top, then hold the Shift key and click here to select all of them. Let me do it again. But why do we even need this? Well, let me go ahead and select a collection, like this for example. Now we can easily, for example, delete all of them at the same time. In previous versions, if you wanted to, for example, transfer some settings of a project to the current file to the current project, some extra and unnecessary materials would have transferred as well. In other words, most of the times we simply would have need to remove some of the materials, and we had to remove them one by one. Now, we can select a collection and remove them all together at the same time. Or we can select a collection and add them to our library. For example, I'm going to go ahead and click on Create New Library here. For its name, I'm going to go with Test and Save. Now, we have our test library here. Now, I'm going to select a group or a collection of materials here. Right-click, Add to the test library. See? Just like removing in previous versions, we had to go through with this process separately as well. So we can say the ability of selecting a group or a collection of materials could add a lot of pace to our work. Next part that we're going to discuss in Revit 2025 is improved vector processing. In this version of the software, when you are working with elements or views containing, you can say, transparent colors, and then you want to create an export, for example, a PDF export out of them, these transparent parts would also be included in your render. And as a result, the PDF file that you're going to create would have a more enhanced quality. And also, another point that I should mention is that now in this version, we have a faster process speed comparing to the previous versions of the software. All right, let me try to elaborate. I'm going to open up Revit, and then enter 3D view to start our work. Okay, we would have a model such as this. First of all, I'm going to make this model a little bit lighter by hiding some of the elements. Here we go. And then from visibility, I'm going to deactivate everything except for section box. I'm going to activate section box from here. Now, I'm going to put an area inside the section box, for example here. Now I'm going to select some elements in this model, in this current model that we are working on. These segments, for example. Then I'm going to go ahead and specify a solid pattern for it and then a color. And give it a little bit of transparency. So we can actually detect the transparency here as well. Now again, for this part, solid pattern, then a color, and 40% of transparency. Okay, now next one. I'm going to repeat the same process all over again, just for the sake of our example. Now, if I go ahead and set everything inside of a sheet, but first I need to collapse it actually, then create a new sheet here, then do a right click, find in project browser, and then drag this inside our sheet. Now, if I try to get a PDF export here, current view, fit, and specify a sample path, and at the end, export. Now, if we go ahead and check the end result PDF file, we can see that all the details that we have specified are completely included. For example, we can easily and accurately detect all of the transparencies that we have here, exactly like what we had in Revit. Now, what if we wanted to create an AutoCAD export? Well, actually, there's no difference. Let me demonstrate. For now, I'm going to set the unit on meters and then create our export. I'm going to use the same path. And let's call it test. Test 2025. Wait for the process to be done. After it's done, I'm going to go to AutoCAD and open up the file, the test 2025 file here in the viewport. And as you can see, all the details are added here as well. All the solid patterns and the parts for the transparencies and everything. Exactly like what we have created in Revit. So overall, this is a very nice ability that we have in this software, which help us create very nice and high quality exports. Alright everyone, another update that we have in Revit 2025 is filter discipline updates. Checking the visibility window, we can see the discipline option, which help us categorize our items and elements better. Now, something interesting has happened to the software when the 2020 version of the software came out. Some new categories have been added to the software. Categories such as medical equipment or food service equipment, audio-visual device, fire protection, vertical circulation, hardscape, temporary structure, and signage. Now, what has happened here is that the software says if you set this on architecture, I'm going to activate all of these options by default automatically. However, if you go with structure, I would only activate two options here, which are temporary structure and vertical circulation. Now, if you go with mechanical, the only activated options would be fire protection, food service equipments, and medical equipments. And overall, it'll show you the activated options in other modes as well. For example, electrical or piping or in infrastructure, the activated options would be these. Now, in fact, if you open up the visibility window here, I'm going to deactivate these. And for example, infrastructure, we had temporary structure, I guess, which by default, as you can see, is activated, as well as vertical circulation. Now, if I, for example, were to check mechanical, as I said, we don't have the options that we had in, for example, infrastructure. Instead, we have food service equipments, fire protection, and down here, medical equipments. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we had such categories since the 20th version of the software. However, in the 25th version, everything is simply more organized because everything is set based on their discipline. And this could cause you to have better and more easier access to everything, and overall help you avoid possible mistakes. Alright everyone, let's talk about search in Project Browser enhancements in Revit 2025. In this software, if you go ahead and search something like a word or even a text in Project Browser window, not only it'll give you the required title, but also you would see the subcategories of that title as well. And you can easily go through all of those items. For example, I've searched for chair here, and as you can see, the software gave me so many different subcategory items related to the word that I have searched for, which was chair. And this would simply give us the ability to work quite more accurately. Now, in previous versions, we would only get the main categories out of our searches. Oh, and by the way, I should mention that search itself is quite new in Revit. In older versions, we were only able to search for families. This item has been added to Revit since a few updates ago. And now in the newest version, we're able to use it in the best way possible. Welcome back, everyone. In this session of Introduction to Revit 2025, we are going to talk about one of the most long-awaited abilities by all the Revit users. In all the previous versions before 2025, you weren't able to reproduce or array an object less than 2 times. And if you wanted to do so, the software would have told us that the number should be something in between 2 to 200, for example. However, now in the 25th version of the software, for linear or radial array, we're able to use numbers smaller than 2, such as 1 or even 0. This is extremely useful. For example, I'm going to enter this plan, L3, let's say. And then I'm going to go ahead and select a family here. Let's see, for example, this one. I'm going to open this in Edit Family. Here we go. Okay, now from File, the New, Family, I'm going to go ahead and select Metric Plumbing Feature. And now I'm going to load this family into our plumbing feature. I'm going to set it, for example, here. A line like this with a center point, and then put a distance here as well. For example, let me set it on 100. Now, I'm going to activate array, then linear or radial. For now, I'm going to go with linear and reproduce the family like this. Now I'm going to select number and add a parameter as our number. Now, as I said, in Revit 2025, we are able to go with any kind of number that we want, including 1 and 0, which are less than 2. As you can see, it considers these two as booleans. In other words, it automatically hides them. Now I'm going to set this on 4 and apply. Now OK, and load it into the project. Okay, and now we are able to set them anywhere in our project. We can use these components anywhere that we want. And again, now we are able to use numbers less than 2 as well. Just remember not to use these families completely alone. I mean, use some other families next to them as well. For example, something like a table or a chair. This way, if you use 0 as your number, you can find them and search for them easier later on. If something like this ever happened, don't worry. Just search for it in Project Browser, right-click, and select it from here. And then you can go ahead and modify the number all over again. And if you have created families using older versions of the software, the new version of the software would actually support those families as well. For example, in L2, I can go ahead and select these and modify their number, for example, to 0 or even 1 or even a larger number. Okay, so this was array in Revit 2025. Alright everyone, let's get into Topo Solids. First of all, Topo Solid was added to Revit since the 24th version of the software. And in the 25th version of the software, this fairly new tool has gone under some enhancements and updates. And as you probably know, this tool is a very useful one. Here you can see the list of the enhancements that we have in the new update of the software. For example, the first one is excavate Topo Solid volume. Then the second one is use the shaft on Topo Solid. And you know what? We are going to go through each item that we can see in this list one by one later on in this session. So for now, let me just close this down and go ahead and open up a topography file. All right. In Revit 2025, whenever we select a topography, up here we can see a tool called Excavate. Now we can use this tool on an interacted area with our selected topography, for example like a roof or a floor or even another Topo Solid, to create an excavation. To give you an example, I'm going to go ahead and create a floor in our topography. Somewhere like here, for example. And finish. Now again, another floor using create similar. This time here. And finish. I'm going to use add speed line to create some, to add some lines to this floor. And then use modify shape editing to add some modifications. Yeah, something like this. Now, we want to excavate these areas. And to do so, we need to select Topo Solid. Then from Topo Solid shaping, we need to select excavate. Now we can just simply click on the area that we want to add the excavation and it'll just simply do that. Let me just set this on shading. Here we go. Now, if you ever wanted to go ahead and add more, you can say additional modifications to your Topo Solid, well, Topo Solid would actually work completely based on those modifications. If I hide this, you can see this case clearly. And the same goes for this one as well. I'm going to hide this again. All right, Control Z. I'm going to select this and move this a little bit more upwards, for example, by 300 millimeters. See, this is a very nice technique to use. Or here, in the previous versions, we had to join these parts. Let me unjoin this for a second. Okay. Now I can select this and then using Excavate, just click on this Topo Solid, and as a result, add an excavation here as well. As you can see, this is extremely useful as well as simple. Now let's talk about another interesting point. Let me just set this on wireframe and select these areas because we have used Ctrl Z before. Alright. An interesting point here is that when we use excavate, it's kind of like we have excavated the earth, right? I mean, in other words, for example, it's kind of like we have subtracted soil out of an area. So, in Properties window down here, we can actually check the details of our excavation, such as the cut volume or the filling volume, and so on. And these numbers are quite accurate as well. And another thing that we have down here is individual excavation volume. If we click on it, we can actually check the exact amount or the exact volume of each element in our excavation process. And we can actually mark these elements as we want. For example, FO2 for this one. Here we go. Then FO1 here. Then we can mark this one, for example, as park. And if we had other elements, we can go ahead and mark them like this. And we can actually select them in our topography and check the marks. Or let's do something else. Let me add a wall to our topography. I will, such as this one. And I'm going to get a duplicate and actually increase its thickness. For example, 1 meter. Now, we are not able to use excavate on elements such as walls. Instead, we can use another tool called cut. And it will kind of do the same thing. So I'm going to select cut and click on the topography and then the wall. And if you hide the wall, we can see that we have an excavation. And then in here, we can see that the wall has been added here as a new element, and we can give it a mark as well, WO1, for example. And also, we can check the mark here. This would help you work quite more accurately when you are working on your schedules. So again, this is an extremely useful item. Now, what if we wanted to get rid of the excavation? Well, it's quite easy. We can just select the area, and then up here, click on Remove Excavation, and at the end, click on the area once more. And again, as always, we can easily add more excavation or even turn back the excavation that we had before using excavation itself. So excavate activated and click here. Very accurate, very simple. All right, everyone, let's move on. Next up, we are going to talk about how we can use shaft in Topo Solid. Now, in previous versions, if you wanted to use shaft in Topo Solid, it would have just cut out the whole interacted area with the Topo Solid. But here, in 25th version of the software, we can actually specify an extension for it. For example, I'm going to go to the top view here and then select shaft and then draw a schematic sketch here. Finish. Now here, as I said, we can actually specify an extension or even we can call it a depth. Let me just use a section box here real quick. Let me see. Okay, something like this. Now, as you can see, I can easily specify a depth before cutting out the area. So as you can probably guess, this is a very useful item which we can use a lot during our projects for example, excavating a specific area in our project. So yeah, that's it. Another update that we have regarding Topo solids in Revit 2025 is that we already know, you know what, let me just remove this one for a second. We already know that we are able to use some elements to cut an area while we are working on a Topo solid. I mean, we had this in previous versions as well, more specifically 24th version. Let me give you an example. I'm going to add a line here on the first level here. Okay. It would be something like this. Yeah, this will do. Now, I'm going to select this and then convert it into an object, into a volumized object. Now finish and then select cut to cut this out of our topography. Again, we had this technique in the previous version of the software, and we could have also used void to do the exact same thing here. Now let's see what is different about Revit 2025. In the 25th version of the software, we are able to set host-based elements here in this area as well. For example, elements such as railings or some site components. So for example, it would be something like this. Again, in previous versions, we weren't able to do this. I mean, the Boolean elements would have just set on the surface or like somewhere around here. Okay? But now, in the new version, we can set them here as well. If I go back to plan here, I can select, for example, railing tools, then pick a new host, and then set some railings inside here as well. I'm going to finish this in 3D view. Okay. This would be the result. I'm going to set this on show here. Then I'm going to select this and then edit. And then try to move this face that we have here a little bit more upwards to create some sort of a slope. Finish. All right. Now, again, as you just saw, we are able to add, or we can say we are able to set elements such as railings or other elements such as railing here as well. And it's quite interesting. Another update that we have in this version is that we are actually able to set a point based on the top plane. Again, for further elaboration, I'm going to open up an empty template and then try to create a Topo solid here. Next thing that I'm going to do here is to move this Topo solid 1 meter above the first level. Like this. Now back to 3D view and select modify sub-element. Remember, by default, top plane is already activated. Now if I select this point, which is 0 right now, and then select current, it would become 1. Because the Topo solid itself is set 1 meter above the first level. Now in here, top plane help us calculate the amount that we want based on the current level and not the top or bottom level. So we can consider this as 0 and then move it upwards for another 250. So here, instead of 1 meter or 1000 millimeters, the elevation code would be 1250 millimeters, as you can see. But here, we still have 1 meter. See? So this is another enhancement regarding Topo solid in Revit 2025. Alright, next characteristic that we can discuss is useful for us when we want to, for example, work on a more complex topographies. As you can see, we have Topo solid by face. Now, I'm going to remove, or you know what, let's just leave this. We can use either mass in place, or we can use conceptual mass. Then select metric mass here. Now back in plan. try to create some reference planes. And I'm going to try to set some distances here and equal them as well. Okay, let me see what's the distance here. It's 13 meters. I need to reduce it a little bit, I'm sorry. Okay, this is better. Right now, A, then B, C, D, and E. Now, I'm going to enter the south view. Then from Model Tools, select Spline. Then draw a schematic sketch on the face here, the A face. Now for B, okay, then C, then D, and last but not least, E. All right. After we're done, I'm going to go ahead and select all of these lines and connect them all. Now let's load them into the project. Now we can just easily convert this model that we've just created into a topography. I'm going to select Topo Solid by face, select this face, and finish. See, this is quite easy. Or we can do something else. I'm going to select rectangle and set one down here. And then try to modify its shape a little bit. Okay. Yeah, that's enough. Finish. Now again, Topo Solid by face to convert this into another topography. And after that, we can actually hide the mess here. And then we can actually add updates to our topography. And by updates, I mean like additional modifications. For example, I'm going to select this vertex here and then press space. And then try to make the topography a little bit more smooth. And move these vertices around a little bit. And what else? I'm going to move this line downwards. And after that, load everything into the project. Show. See, we have the new modifications here. I'll just click on Update. And then we can hide this once more. Very useful and interesting. Alright, let's move on to our next item, which is Topo Solid Smooth Shading. As you can see here, the Topo Solid that we have is not that, you can say, smooth. Yeah, it's not that soft. Okay. Now, from Massing Insight, if we go ahead and select Topo Solid Smooth Shading, the software would give us, it opens a window containing some messages and options. Now, the messages include the functions, some notes regarding functions and limitations of this item. As you can see, the function part says you can get a smooth object while you're using a styles or visual styles such as these ones. Then function second note give us some points about how to create a smooth export. Alright, then we have the limitation parts. Now, in fact, there are 3 limitations to this item, but we only have 2 of them for some reason here. Now, the first note here says, if you use smooth shading, the patterns won't be visible in your Topo Solid. Now, the second note, which is not here for some reason, says you're not able to use the call insert on Topo Solids, on smooth Topo Solids. And the third note says, material display cannot be overridden with paint or graphic overrides. Alright, now let's go ahead and check some of the things that we've just discussed. For example, let's go ahead and talk about the call insert. First, let me insert an image. Let's see. Autodesk. Okay. Now I need to set this in my Topo Solid on the realistic mode. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to set this to call here. Now, as I mentioned in the limitation notes before, we can't use this in smooth area. So if I go ahead and use smooth, let me just find this. Okay, now if I use smooth shading, select this, create similar. As you can see, we can set this to call here in our Topo Solid right now. But if we activate this, because now we have a smooth area, we can't use this, the call item. All right. Next item is paint. We can select it. And as you can see, again, it doesn't work on the smooth Topo Solids. So, again, I'm going to cancel this. Then from Masking and Site, I'm going to deactivate this. Immediately afterwards, the paints would be visible again. But when we activate Smooth option, they won't be displayed. Or if you select this again and then open up Override by Elements, and then from by Material, I'm going to add a pattern here. For example, let's see this one maybe. Any color. Now I'm going to set this on shaded or, another mode. Okay. Now, first I'm going to deactivate this option. And as a result, we would be able to see the patterns. But if we activate this, it won't be supporting the patterns anymore. So I'm going to go back here and deactivate our pattern, or in other words, set it on by material. So overall, we should pay attention to the function and limitation points. Another point that we have here is that when we want to edit a Topo Solid, we can see, or we are able to see the contour lines, and we can actually use them for our modifications. And this wasn't the case in previous versions of this software, and this is actually quite helpful for us when it comes to editing the Topo Solids. Alright, the next point that we can talk about is actually for those of you who are still using the previous versions of the software. Let me just try to demonstrate from here. It says in previous versions of the software, we had something called Topo Surface. And if you remember, also we had some other tools called building pads. Now, it says that if you have a topography created using building pads and Topo Surface, here all the building pads would turn into excavations and all the Topo Surfaces would turn into Topo Solids. Okay, now if you select the Topo Solid itself here, and then click on Shape Editing up here, we would see an additional option here called Snap to Editor Points and Lines. Now, if we go ahead and select Add Points here, and then let's say Snap is activated as well. Now, as you can see, it does not recognize these lines. So we need to select somewhere close to these lines. And if you activate this, now we would be able to select the lines as bases or references. But if we deactivate it once more, again, these lines won't be recognized. And if you click on the line here, it might just select another area. But again, if you activate it, we can exactly select the line itself. In fact, we can say that we can split this here. However, this one is a completely separate vertex. Alright everyone, these were all of the enhancements and updates regarding Topo Solid in Revit 2025. Welcome back everyone. Today we're going to discuss some other extremely useful items that we have in Revit 2025, which are auto join and lock. We can use these items when we are working on walls. Well, in fact, let's say we are working on some walls in Revit, and some of them are finishing works, some of them are frameworks, and let's say they are connected. Now we have the ability to join and lock them automatically. Let me give you an example. I'm going to select wall here, and as you can see, two new items have been added here. First one is auto join. Let's see what it does. I'm going to select wall again. Again, we can see the two new items. But as you can see, they are not yet activated. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a schematic wall here. And then another one next to it. Now, if nothing got activated, it means that these two walls cannot be joined or locked. But if the options and items were activated, if we draw the walls again, they would automatically be joined up, as you can see. And if we use join and lock, not only it's going to join the walls, but also it'll lock them as well. See, again, these two walls are completely separate. These two are joined, but not locked. And if we move one of them, we would get the unjoined warning. But in the third model, because they are locked as well, if we move one of them, the second one would move accordingly. These items are extremely useful when it comes to working and developing the frameworks and finishing works in your projects. And also another interesting point is that if we set something like a door or a window on them, as you can see, something like an opening would automatically be added to our walls. But remember, this technique only works for simple openings, not the complex ones. I mean, sometimes we might be working with some families with a very complex openings. So again, it's not going to support those types of openings. Only simple openings and simple voids. Okay, just like other techniques and items that are new and have just been added to the software in the newest version, these items have some limitations as well. Now, obviously, these limitations might go away in the future when the new versions of the software come out. Okay, let's see what these limitations are. First of all, these two items would only work on architectural walls. So, in other words, if you go ahead and select structural walls, these two items won't appear anymore. So again, we can just use them for architectural walls. Okay. The next point is, if you have created some walls in previous versions of Revit software, for example, 2024 version or 2023 and so on, some walls such as these, for example, and we know that these walls are not obviously joined because we didn't have these items. And when we open these walls in Revit 2025, it doesn't join them up automatically. And you have to go through the joining process completely manually. In other words, you get what you had in previous versions. And also, if you use stocked wall type walls, again, these two items won't be activated. They won't be available for us to use. Okay, now we can use these items on all the tools that we have in draw section. However, if we select pick face, they would be deactivated once more. Okay, so let's see what else. The next point is for the slanted walls. For example, let me create a slanted wall here. Well, actually, slanted or tapered, they are not that different. 5-degree angle. And set a wall here like this. Okay, now if I go ahead and add another wall, well, let's actually set both views next to each other to have a better view. Now let's say we have another wall next to this one, and now I'm going to select auto join. If you have a slanted wall, we actually are able to use auto join. However, auto join and lock will not work for these types of walls. I mean, although it's activated, unfortunately it won't work. So for slanted and tapered wall, we are only able to use auto join. So overall, these limitations and rules are what we need to consider or take into consideration when we want to work on walls in our projects. For example, when we are working on framework walls or even finishing work walls, these are some important aspects which we need to take into consideration. For example, we have a core or a framework wall here, like this. And on this wall, we might have some sort of a finishing work. Let's see. I'm not gonna do something like very confusing. I'm gonna use what I have already in my software. Yeah, these would work. These are the details of my finishing work. Now, if I want to set these finishing works, I'm going to activate auto join and lock. There we go. And start setting these finishings. Fine. As you can see, we draw the finishing and the framework completely separately, but they are joined up. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we can create openings in these walls for our doors and windows. And unlike what we had in previous versions, we don't need to join the openings and the walls manually. Everything would be done automatically, and this would be extremely useful in our modeling process. Okay, everyone, today we're going to talk about how we can control and manage end wrappings separately and in our own project environment. I mean, for example, whether if you want to wrap the endpoints of the walls or not. Okay, without any further ado, let's go ahead and see how exactly we can do this. First of all, the first thing that we need here is a wall with a finishing work set on it. For example, this wall. Now, when we select this wall, as you can see, no symbols would appear. If we want them to be displayed, we need to go ahead and from wrapping at ends, activate either exterior or interior option. Alright, now if I click on OK, the symbols would appear here, and now we are able to control the wrappings in our endpoints. See? Just like this. And we can actually manage the wrapping in both sides completely separately. This is very interesting. Why? Because when you set the settings from either type properties window or edit assembly window, both of the sides would automatically be wrapped up. This was the case in previous versions, but now, as I said earlier, we can control the wrappings in both sides completely separately. This is, again, a very useful technique when it comes to working on walls containing both frameworks and finishing works. We can, for example, easily wrap up one side and not the other one. And the limitation that I've mentioned just now is gone in the new version. Again, this technique is most useful for when you are working on finishing works and frameworks in a wall at the same time, but when you are working on them separately, this might not be so useful. Alright everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about multi-loop mullions or multi-loop mullions profiles. This is most useful for those of you who are working in facade or view designing field. In previous versions of the software, when it came to using profiles or mullion profiles, we were only able to use only one closed down boundary. However, we don't have this limitation in the new version of the software. We just need to make sure that the boundaries that we want to use won't intercept each other. I mean, there shouldn't be an interaction point between the boundaries. Alright, now let's go ahead and work on an example to see how exactly this item works. I have a CAD file here, as you can see, containing views and sections. Now we can easily use such CAD files in Revit, as you probably know by now. Just make sure that Revit supports the lines that you have in a file, because as you know, Revit does not support the line weight less than 0.7. And also, the profile shouldn't be interacted. Okay, I'm going to go back to Revit from File, New, then Families, and then select Metric Profile Mullions. Open. Now from Insert, Import CAD, import the file that we just saw. Now, because this is only an example and, well, maybe even a test, I'm going to draw this sketch quite schematically. So I'm going to go to Manage, Object Style, set the color for all of these on red. Well, maybe even blue, because red is my selection color. Now I'm going to activate line and start drawing. I'm going to start drawing the sketches. As I said before, I'm doing this schematically and hypothetically. For example, after this line here, I'm going to set a rectangle in here, for example, and then another one here. Again, this is completely hypothetically. I'm just trying to tell you that you are easily able to use CAD files. I'm going to remove these. Then again, another rectangle inside here. Oh, and by the way, try to close down all the openings that we have, because we need to have a completely closed down boundary. Right now we can use mirror to this side. And then another closed boundary, another rectangle here. Like this. And now we can go ahead and load this into our project. So from Family, then Mullion, curtain wall mullion, rectangular. I'm going to get a duplicate, for example, from here. Let's call it mullion multi-profile. Now double click here, and then select the family that we have created. And if there was any kind of problem with your family, you would get a warning here. Okay? Right now, I'm going to create a curtain wall here. Something like this. Now, I'm going to select this. Second level. Then I'm going to enter edit type. Replace it with a profile, that we've created. I'm going to customize all of these based on what we have created. And here we go. We have a very nice and high quality profile here. This is a very good technique, and you're able to use it in any way that you want in any part of your projects. You can create so many beautiful details. And also, you can actually work based on the details that we have in CAD files. For example, whether if we need horizontal or vertical profiles. So these are all very useful points that you can use when you are working in Revit. And by the way, they are not that difficult either. Just remember the limitations that I've mentioned at the beginning of this very session. For example, I said in Revit, if you wanted to draw a line, you cannot use a line weight less than 0.7 or 0.8 actually. This is why we cannot draw such detailed sketches in Revit yet. And we in fact use other softwares such as AutoCAD. And then we can, for example, simplify these sketches and convert these into, for example, a straight line, and then attach this detail as a two-dimensional, and then use them in Revit. The next characteristic that we have in Revit 2025 is related to Revit structure. In this version of the software, using Advanced Steel, we can actually have a better and more enhanced workflow. Well, actually, we had the Advanced Steel plugin in previous versions of the software as well. However, Now, if we use this plugin for processes such as numbering, single part, assembly part, what else, marking, and so on, when we want to enter such models and files into Revit, now part numbers and assembles would be retained. And we can use them, for example, in tagging and create more enhanced and better details. All right, let me try to elaborate on what I've just said. This is the advanced steel software. I'm going to open up a template here. And then I'm going to select, for example, column and set one in 0 and 0 coordinates here. And another one in the same direction. Now, I'm going to do a right click, set their IP on 500, and then again in the same direction, I'm going to try to move this one a little bit more. And then I'm going to select BIM and set one here. Now, if we want to mark all the advanced tools elements that we use in Shop completely correctly, we have some segments here which we can go through. For example, single part, main part, assembly part, and after numbering, they would be set automatically. Now, from connection, I'm going to go ahead and create a connection here. For example, base plate. No. Remember, this is just an example, so I'm not going to go through any specific settings here. Now, I'm going to select split and then try to split this top part like this. And then I'm going to use splice. If I can find it, let me see. I'm going to create a connection between these two parts. And then another one here. Again, forget about the settings. We're just trying to focus on creating the connections. So I'm going to create the connections in these areas. Okay. Now that we have the connections, I'm going to close this down and then set this on conceptual. All right. Now here, I'm going to delete this part. Okay. And what else? Let me see. I'm going to leave this. Okay, now from outputs, I'm going to select numbering. I'm not going to change any of these settings here. And as you can see in this table here, we have some part numbers. And if we go ahead and do a double click on each part here, they would be added to the properties window here, just as you can see. All right, now we can use a couple of options here. For example, export or synchronize to support these parts in Revit. And if you want to open up such files in Revit, first off, you need to install Advanced Steel plugin, and then you can find it in Add in tab in Revit. Right now, as you can see, I don't have it, so I can't show you anything. Nevertheless, to open up such files, you need to install this plugin first. So overall, this was another interesting ability that we have in the newest version of Revit software. All right, moving on in Revit 2025, we get to local coordinate system orientation for analytical panels and members. As you can guess from its long name, in Revit 2025, we are able to manage the directions of local coordinate systems of members and panels regarding analytical faces and elements. I know it seems a little bit confusing, so let me just elaborate on it. In my viewport, I'm going to do a right click and select Find Project Browser to find this 3D view. Now I need a duplicate here and then set these two views next to each other. Here we got the physical model, and in this view we want to display an analytical version of it. Now, we already know that since Revit 2022, we have to activate the analytical lines manually. So in here, I'm going to type down VG, then deactivate model. And instead, I'm going to activate some of the analytical options here. I don't need nodes. And I don't have ducts here, so I'm going to deactivate this as well. And also pipes. Now, apply and OK. Now in here, again, VG, I'm going to deactivate all the analyticals, because in here we just want the physicals. Now I'm going to select analytical automation. Again, what we are doing here is trying to activate analytical surfaces and lines. So I'm going to select this. Now Dynamo player would open for us, and it contains 2 items. Now we can use the first item to convert analytical lines into models, and we can use the second item to convert models into analyticals. Well, obviously we need the second one, so I'm going to select it. Now in here we can go ahead and select the required items. I'm actually going to select everything, so I'm going to click on select, then do a click drag like this to get analytical lines for all the structural elements. And again, I'm not going to go through any specific settings. Now based on the volume of your file and its complexity, it might take a few seconds to create all the analytical lines. So we're just going to wait for it, and after we're done, we can move on with the rest of our work. All right, these are the analytical lines that we needed. Now if we select each element, we can see that they have their own particular axis. And then in here, we have some settings, which we can use later on for further analysis. All right, I'm going to go back to one of these levels, for example, L3. And then I'm going to set the template here on none. And then activate analytical lines. Set this on fine. And set the scale on 1/50th. Now I'm going to turn off the model from visibility and graphics for now. Just the analytical lines. And I'm going to deactivate node as well. I don't want this model to be too crowded. These would be our analytical surfaces and lines. Now, if we take a look at the axis, we can actually detect their directions. However, sometimes you might be working with a model containing axes with reverse directions. For example, one of them might be set towards right and another one might be set towards left. So in fact, we can say that there is a lack of consistency between them. However, now you are able to select several analytical lines and then, for example, modify their x-courses simultaneously. This is an extremely useful and nice technique that we can use in our projects with a few clicks. Now, as you can see, for example, all of these are set in a correct and same direction. But what about surfaces? Well, let me select some surfaces. As you can see, we have some surfaces here. Then again, we can, for example, change up their x-courses based on this line here. Or maybe align them based on this line. Or based on this line here. Or we can actually do this for the z-course. Why not? See? All right, back to plan. So as you can see, you can easily manage all the lines and surfaces, analytical lines and surfaces that we have, and set them in a correct directions so that you won't face any problems later on in your analysis. One of the most important and interesting parts regarding the topic of a structure in Revit is splicing in Rebar. This is another long-awaited characteristic by Revit users, which has finally been added in Revit 2025. And, well, we can use it from now on. And again, before we start getting to anything, we need to understand that because this is a new feature, it has some specific limitations. For example, for now, we are able to use this feature only on straight rebars. Okay, so for example, we can't use this on, you can say, spiral rebars, or even arc rebars, or even multiplanar rebars. Oh, by the way, multiplanar rebars are those rebars which move through multiple surfaces. For example, let me try to show you how it's done. A rebar such as this. Or other rebars which we can't work on for now using this feature include area enforcements, path enforcements, freeforms, and so on. So only straight rebars. Now, we can work with this feature based on the lengths that we have or based on some reference lines that we have. And we can work with it in both plan and 3D views. Then, in instance properties and edit type windows, we would have some settings which we can go through when we want to work with this feature. For example, in properties window, we have splice position. Well, it obviously points out the position of our splice. It has 3 modes, middle, end 1, and end 2. Now, sometimes when we are working with splice, we might create an overlap, and these modes control that overlap situation based on middle, for example, or end 1, or, based on end 2, which is somehow a reverse mode for end 1. So again, this is middle, half here and half on the other side. Then we have end 1, everything would be set on the left, and end 2, everything would be set on the right. Alright, then in type properties window, we can control and manage shift bars, which points out the position of rebars after splicing. We can either set them next to each other or on top of each other. Or another setting that we have here is stagger length multiplier, which we can use to specify some numbers and amounts to control and manage the overlapping situation in one of those modes that we've talked about earlier more accurately. For example, as you can see in the sample here, the overlap has moved for 1 unit in each mode. And the last option that we have here is lap length multiplier, which controls the amount of our overlap, and here is set on 60. Alright, so this was a simple introduction to splice. Now let's go ahead and see how exactly this feature works. I'm going to open up a structural empty template, and then enter the first level in the plan, and then I'm going to use grid to create some schematic axis. 5 meters, for example. Now I'm going to select array from here to this point and 6. Now from structural segments, I'm going to select slab and set one here. Finish. And for its thickness, I'm going to go with 600 millimeters. I'm going to remove those symbols for now. Now, select, and then from area, although I said this doesn't support area, I'm just going to use this because I'm trying to work faster. And after that, we can actually use remove system. Just want to consider the top part here with rebar number 22. 300 of spacing is good. And yeah, okay. Now I'm going to set this on wireframe to have a better view. Now fine. Now, as I said, if we select this, splicing won't work. So to get rid of this problem, I'm going to go to System and click on Remove. Now if you select this, a tool would appear for us in Modify Structural Rebar here called Splice. As you can see, it contains 2 items, Splice Rebar and Insert Coupler. Well, we actually had coupler before, in previous versions. But Splice Rebar is a new item. When we select it, immediately in Reborn, some items would appear. splice pick line, splice length, and modify. Then, as I mentioned before, if we check properties, we can see splice position. As you remember, we had 3 modes, middle, end 1, and end 2. And the default mode is middle. Now, if I click on this line here, which is our baseline, the splice would go through 50-50, as you can see. But if I select end 1, for example, everything would be set on the right. And it goes the other way as well. If we select end 2, as you can see, everything would be set on the left side. Oh, and by the way, we can switch in between these modes by pressing space on the keyboard. See? End 1, middle, end 2, again middle, delete, add again, and we can use modify to change them. See, this is, for example, most useful for optimizing the rebars. For those people who work with shop, we can even remove the splice completely like this. Okay, I'm going to cancel this for now. Alright, so far so good. I'm going to go ahead and select this line again. But before that, let me give you another point. You might have some reference planes, such as these ones. Or you might even have a model line, like this here. Now, select, then splice. What I'm trying to tell you here is that splice would actually support all of these line types as well. For example, if I select this, splice would be like this. Now we can remove, then here. So in fact, with one click we can add them, and with another one we can remove them. Okay, I'm going to add this for now and go to edit type. Now, as I said, in edit type we have some options and settings as well, and now we are going to go through them one by one and see what they are and how they work. End to end here, which set them on top of each other, exactly on top of each other. I'm going to change this back to the default version. Now, let's go ahead and see what we have in edit type. If shift bar was set on bar plane, they would be set next to each other parallelly. But if you set it on none, again, they would set on top of each other. Let me create a section here and then enter it. And then set these next to each other like this using WT. Now I'm going to minimize this because we might need it later on. Now again, select and then select splice once more. Click here, enter edit type, set this on none, apply and OK. And as you can see, they are set on top of each other. So if I press finish, the rebars would be set on top of each other. I mean, would remain on top of each other. Again, activate splice. Now modify. Now I'm going to enter the type, then plan here to set these next to each other and get rid of the overlap. These are quite interesting if you think about it. Now, next in stagger length multiplier, if you set the number on 1, it'll move these only by 1 unit. Now, for example, let's change it to 2. And as you can see, the gap would increase to 2 units. For now, I'm going to go with 0. And here, I'm going to set the overlap on 70. Let me turn it back to, change it back to 60. Here we go. After we're done, we can click on finish and just wait for it till it gets updated. Now again, we can select this once more and then from splice, and then in here from by length, we can specify the minimum and maximum lengths that we need for our rebars. For example, I'm going to set this on end, minimum on 1 meter and maximum on 9 meters. After we set the numbers, we can check a preview of what we're going to have by moving the cursor on the rebar. And now, for example, I can change this to start to avoid creating unnecessary interceptions. Or I can actually remove this and then set this on 8 meters. And this is going to be our result. And we can just click here. And again, after we're done, we can click on finish. Another important point here is that there's some sort of a consistency between all of these. So if we were to move one of them, for example, the other one would move accordingly. This technique is most useful for example, when you want to do some optimizing for your rebars by moving them around a little bit and manually. And then another interesting point here is that now we can go to view and then filter and then specify the maximum and minimum rebars that we need. For example, I have a new rebar here called maximum rebar. Now, as you can see, structural rebar is activated. And then I'm going to activate maximum rebar length here as well. Now I'm going to set this on greater than or equal to. For example, greater than 12 meters. And for the minimum number, I can go with, for example, 1 meter. Okay, now in here, I'm going to hide these. Then I'm going to select one of these walls here, select only by host. Then I'm going to deactivate this and then set this on shaded to see the rebars better. And then from visibility and graphics window, then filter, I'm going to add these two. Now for the maximum one, I'm going to go with a red color for fill pattern and color. And for the minimum, I'm going to go with blue. Okay. We don't have any colors here because if we select this, the length is 3.5 meters, as you can see, which is not what we can, something that we can use. And here, again, we have 8 meters. Again, it's not suitable here. All right. I'm going to select these for a second. And from Splice Rebar, I'm going to try to remove them for a moment. Like this. Then I'm going to use pick line to pick these lines. And then click on finish. Now let's check them again. I'm going to select this. The length is 11 point something. Doesn't work. Then we have 10 meters. All right. Again, I'm going to select them. Modify. Remove one of them. See, now it's red. Now again, I'm going to use modify to select this. Then I'm going to move this a little bit more backwards. All right. It seems like the length that we have here is not working, so let me go ahead and change up the length of the overlap that we have. See? Now it's blue. Again, minimum was blue and maximum was red. And if you want to reset this again, you can add another splice here. Now it's not maximum anymore, so it's not red. Finish, and here we go. Again, this is very useful for when we are working with shop, for example. We can actually use this technique on elevation walls or even section walls. Let me set a wall here, and then I'm going to add a section line here. Okay. Now I'm going to enter this. Then I'm going to select this. 6500. Right. Then set this on unconnected with 12 meters or 15. Now I'm going to select this and then select area again. Create something like this. Finish. Now I'm gonna deactivate these options. Then I'm gonna click here and another one here. Now remove system, set the diameter on 22 and deactivate this again. And as you can see, all of them have the red color. Now let's see what else we can do. We can, for example, set a line here, for example a diagonal line. And you might be working based on lengths or some straight lines. It doesn't matter. I'm going to select the rebars, splice, and then set our splice here based on this line. Or I can do something else, for example, from by length, and specify the minimum and maximum lengths. And as I mentioned before, we can actually do this in 3D view as well. Now for this side. Okay. Now we have both faces. After we're done, we can click on finish. And these would be our rebars. As you can see here, we have the blue color, and it's because it considered the minimum number for its filter, minimum length. So basically, this is how you can work with splice. And after you're done, again, you can select these, for example, and add more modifications or even remove them if you didn't want them. Next improved feature that we have in Revit 2025 is improved control of annotations in bending details. This means that in a new version of the software, we are able to move these numbers, tags, and details around and set them anywhere that we find more suitable. Alright, let me give you an example. I'm going to enter one of these details. Let's say here. If I select, for example, this rebar here, I can go ahead and use bending detail and then move this outwards. Then I'm going to use align and use space to align the tag as well, like this. Or we can, for example, open up this list here and set it on the left. All right. Another point that we have here is that we can move the cursor here, press tab, and after it got selected, we can move it. Or we can do the same thing, but this time change up the scale. See? Or again, move it. And basically, we are controlling the details further. Now, exactly like like what we had in previous versions, here we can control the size or their place. For example, I'm going to click on settings here. Then I'm going to set this on 1.50 transparent. Okay, apply, and okay. See, their dimensions got modified. So this is another technique that we are able to use. Another similar feature, well, somehow similar feature that we have here and we are able to use is the ability to add a schematic tag of rebars next to the rest of the tags, which would help us have a better presentation of the details that we want to use in our rebars. As an example, I'm going to select this and then select bending details, and after that, schematic. Now, as a result of this, we would have a schematic shape of this rebar next to this tag, and we can use space on our keyboard to set it in the best position possible. And we can actually do the same thing for the rest of the details. We just need to select the detail that we want, and then we can activate bending details, and then we can choose from realistic or schematic shape. And as I said before, we can use space to change up the position and move it in the location that we want to. Or we can select this and then from edit type, modify the dimensions. For example, here, I'm going to set this on 0.2. And by the way, these numbers should be set based on the units that you are working with in your project. Another interesting feature that we can discuss regarding the structure in Revit 2025 is the topic of constants in rebars. As an example, I am going to open up a structural file here. Okay, let me set this on maximum and plan. Then from structural, isolate foundation. I'm going to set this here, 600, 2 meters by 2 meters. Now, I'm going to enter edit family. Then in plan, to explain this better, I'm going to select these reference lines. Then set this on strong reference. And for its parameters, I'm going to go with instance. Because I need the grip here, so I need it to be activated to help me work better. All right. I'm going to set a section here. And then enter the section. Now, I want to set a rebar here. For its diameter, I'm going to go with 22 again. And with any number that we want. For their gap, I'm going to go with 300, and we can set them here. Reduce the size here, and set this on fine. As you can see, these shape handles are activated here. We can use them to change up the geometry, and rebar would move and change accordingly. Now, if we select the rebar itself, and up here select edit constant, we would see 3 items. First one is disable current, as you can see, which points out the selected area, which is yellow here, by the way. Now, if you select this and click on disable, finish, it does not consider the gap. So again, Control Z, then again, select this, edit, and reset. Now I'm going to move this here and finish. And if you select it again, we can see that they move together. Now, if I go ahead and select disable all this time, it's not going to consider or retain the cover on any of the sides. So obviously this could be quite helpful in some parts of our work. Reset and finish. This item would help the rebars not to go under any specific or unnecessary and extra changes. You can use this technique when you want to set some rebars, for example, in a staircase, or when you want to set some additional elements in between the rebars, which might affect the geometry of the rebars. Now we have 2 additional features in connections as well. Let's see what they are. First, I'm going to set some columns here. Like this. Okay. Then I'm going to enter the second level, select beam, and set some beams here. Then select beam system, each 1 meter. Set the beams like this. Now, let's enter 3D view. I'm going to select connection. I'm going to set a connection here. Some other connections in these areas. And then another one here. Now from connection settings, load the connections that we want to. For example, base plate, then splice, and then let's see what else. I'm going to select share place here and this one. All right, now first I'm going to select base plate and set one here. Then for this part, I'm going to select this connection. Let me set this on fine for a second. And yeah, here we go. The point that we have here is, in previous versions of the software, when we set some connections on elements or some structures, split tools didn't work on them. But now this is not a case anymore. We can easily use split tools as well. We can use split on connections or any other area that we want to. This is very nice. This is one of those, you can say, necessary features that users very needed, you can say. And now it has been added in the 25th version of the software. The next feature that we can discuss here is when you have a connection and you want to set some dimensions on that connection or even tags. For example, from file, then new, then from annotation, I'm going to select metric generic tag. Then I'm going to delete this. And then from category, I'm going to select structural connection, then tag, and I'm going to set a connection tag here. All right. Now I'm going to load this into the project. So again, sometimes you might need to tag the connections. Here, I'm going to set this on free so that I would be able to move them around easily. Just like this. See? In Revit 2025, if you select the connection and then up here, click on break, and then if there was any tag set on them, it'll retain them. It's not going to remove anything. And if an element or a tag was removed, it means that the tag is not set on the connection. But in previous versions, it would have removed everything completely.